You were here once before with the late great jazz sax player Illinois Jacquet, and you know the two of you did a series of jazz songs in a completely convincing kind of quote unquote regular jazz voice. Right. Now here you are singing rock songs again in your non-operatic voice. What's been this interest in recent years in sort of exploring that part of your voice?
Well, this, jazz was an organic and sort of natural progression for me because that's where I started. This is really left field. I mean, this was the farthest thing from my mind. I wasn't familiar with any of this music at all. And I had a sort of list of other potential projects that might be considered outside of core classical, but they were kind of more the norm of what you find people doing in my position. And I think I was kind of intrigued by the fact that this was so far off the beaten track, and I really liked the music.
Well, there's a history of opera singers doing things like Broadway songs and spirituals and stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
Usually in their operatic voices,
Exactly.
I guess there was no question of using an operatic voice if you were going to sing Arcade Fire or something like that.
Well, I do a little bit of it. I've got the obligatos up high, and there's a little bit of it. In fact, in one case, my daughter pinch hits for me. I said, I've been singing low for a while, honey. Why don't you go in and sing that high B flat? And she does a great job. So, I wanted to, if I was going to do this, I really wanted to try and find the right style and find the right voice for it, and not sing, apply the classical voice to this other style of music. So it's more authentic, I hope.
Now, the way the record came about, it was a couple of rock promoter manager types came to you through your record company and brought you this idea.
Peter Mensch and Cliff Bernstein had this idea for 10 years. They've been calling of Q Prime, and they're most famous, I think, for managing Metallica. Mm-hmm. But they have a lot of great bands. And they came to Christopher Roberts at Universal Classics, and for 10 years said, okay, come on, we really want, can Renée do this? And they saw, evidently, the poster, the Thais poster that was on the buses and on the bus stops last season for the Met, and then saw me sing with Elvis Costello on his show Spectacle. So they convinced Chris to introduce me, and I'm always curious. I'm musically curious. I like to learn things, and they handed me literally a CD with this spreadsheet of kind of things I could check off about each track. It was fun, actually.
So did you find when you went through this CD of suggested songs that because you have kids, you might have been somewhat familiar with them, or was it all just completely terra incognita?
No, in fact, the only thing that I was familiar with because of children is Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, because of Shrek, and that was not on the list. That was actually something the producer and I decided to use as a test, as a demo track. It was never intended to be part of this project. But nothing else. The only other thing I knew was the Peter Gabriel song, which was a big hit, I guess, in the 80s, and then that was it. I didn't know any of this music. So I came home. So my first surprise was to have both of my teenage children say, yeah, of course we know Muse.
We know all this stuff.
Yeah, My Body's a Cage is my favorite song, said my 14-year-old. And so we started from there with me saying, okay, and then they were giving me CDs and saying, well, if you like that, listen to this. So it was really kind of fun also for us to explore this music together.
You sing with a full-on orchestra. That can be really loud, but singing on top of amplified instruments, guitars up to 11, and the drummer thrashing away and stuff. How different? Well, first of all, did you do any of that, or was everything tracked in before you sang?
Well, the process was so different from what we do, obviously. First of all, we work acoustically entirely, so the orchestra has to balance to my voice and the volume. But then I'm up an octave, so I'm automatically louder, generally speaking. In this lower range, I wouldn't have very much volume in person. And so he started with a sort of a basic track, and then we built the vocals. This is all while I was singing at the Met, the Rosenkavalier. So I'd have a performance, and then I'd come into the studio the next day, and now for something really different. and then eventually David Kahn, who made these arrangements, would layer them and then bring in the live instrumentalists who played ultimately in the final. And then it's mixed. Then it's edited and then it's mixed. It's a much more arduous, longer process than what we face in a recording. I get 10 hours to make an orchestral recording because that's how much anybody could afford because of the expense of the orchestra, and that's it. And this is just sort of completely open-ended in a funny way. It's different.
Well, how is it for your voice to spend, an evening out on stage at the Met and then come into the studio the next day, drop down the octave, and sing with a almost completely different part of your instrument?
Well, the thing about this is that it's where I speak, so it's so natural. I don't have to warm up. I don't have to go to the weightlifting that is required of my operatic sound. That's nothing natural about singing opera. For a woman, I mean, we are not singing where we speak, which is why it's hard for us to be understood. For instance, a soprano voice. So in this case, it's just an extension of speech, really, speech on pitch. But I had so much to learn about style and text and rhythm. I mean, to get a different sense of rhythm, it's very different from jazz. Jazz is much freer, rhythmically speaking, than rock music is. Rock, you really do need to be closer to the beat a lot of the time. And it was a blast to learn about these things that I had really never known. And even if I had tried it, I'm sure I would have messed it up, so it was nice to have a coach.
So it sounds like it was a little more work than, people would think. Oh, well, she can sing opera, she can sing anything.
Exactly. And it was a lot more work. I mean, opera takes 10 years to really master because you have languages. There's just so many things. It's 300 years of music. But this was still really much harder than I expected it to be. And just how to pronounce a word and that slight shift and stylistically to make sure it wasn't sort of, stylistically just in poor taste. And David impressed upon me from the beginning. He said, people who love this music love it as much as you love your music. And if you don't give it the same care and attention, they're just gonna, they won't take it seriously.
Well, now, who is this aimed at the indie rock crowd, or are you hoping to get classical listeners? I mean, where's the audience, do you think, for this?
Well, that was my question all along throughout the whole project, because I couldn't quite figure it out myself. And the reason why, and everyone agreed, is that there's really no precedent for this. Most of the time, with the one exception, I can think of Eileen Farrell, who used to sing big band records. But when opera singers cross over and sing other music, generally speaking, they keep their opera voice and just change the repertoire. And so this is already different. To sound unrecognizable in a way is a bit of a risk. And then, you've got people who love the music who are going to think, first of all, these are young, angry men, mostly with the exception of Duffy, who've written this music and who are singing high up in their registers and really shouting. And so I'm automatically a mature woman who's singing low. So it's just a different statement from the first pitch. So they kind of said, we don't know who the audience is. We think a lot of different kinds of people might like it, and let's just put it out there and see what happens.
And this really is, in some ways, a family affair. I mean, with your daughters kind of feeding you other records to listen to, and then contributing their voices.
Right, and my sister as well. She's always been singing other styles of music, and it was fun. It was really kind of nice to share this. I mean, obviously, I can't share the studio with them, and when I'm making a classical recording, so this was really a lot of fun to do this project. And I also wanted my daughters to see how much work it is. That this isn't just glamour. It's not what you see in the EPK of the top pop singers.
The electronic press
yes,
kit, yeah.
Exactly. So and they enjoyed it a lot. David Kahn made it a very pleasurable experience for them.
So the album is called Dark Hope, a collection of these rock covers. Have you sung any of these songs live?
I've been singing them for the last 2 weeks, and in the UK on television and in a telecast the other day that won't be broadcast for a while. And this morning on Good Morning America, so that's probably up on the website, with the band. It's just such a charge for me after all these years, especially now, to be in front of a band where the bass drum has my name on it. It's got a little skin on it and everything. It's like every young person's fantasy,